Guys, what is up? I've got an orange amp to show off today. Now, this is the first orange amp that I've actually gotten to spend a decent amount of time with. Our band, when I lived back in Montgomery, the band I was with, we recorded with a guy named Andy Jackson from the band Hot Rod Circuit back in Montgomery. And he had an orange, he had a 30 watt orange. I can't remember what model it was, and I looked through the pictures of the studio to figure out which model it was to see if we had any pictures, and unfortunately I didn't have any. But suffice to say, I'm having an absolute blast with this amp. And again, it was a recommendation from my guy at Zzounds, which again, thanks to them, I have this amazing amp to show you guys. But I had asked him how the Rocker Verb amps were, because I was wanting to try out the Rocker Verb 50. And he's like, I want you to try this one first. And I really didn't know anything about this amp, to be honest with you guys. And it wasn't until he mentioned it, I started to look at the product description, the specs and stuff like that. And I was like, another EL84 amp. I don't know if I want to do that after coming off of the EL84 based Mesa, the Baby Mark V. Not that I didn't like it. It's just I wanted to play through some big glass and get that bigger sound. And he was like, no, bro, just trust me on this one. And boy, was he right. This is a wildly powerful amp. And if you look on the inside, back behind this thing, you not only see the 4 EL84s, you also see a tube rectifier. But more importantly than that, and I think the secret sauce behind this thing hitting like a truck, is absolutely enormous transformers in this thing. This amp weighs easily as much as a 100 watt head. And when I measure the transformers on these things, they're about the same size as the ones in my Splawn, which is well beyond 100 watts. So I've always heard the phrase from a couple of guys, big iron equals big power. And they definitely went all in with this amp, with the transformers. So the amp, it is built like an absolute tank. And for those of you who either have owned oranges in the past or currently own an orange, I'm sure I'm speaking to the preaching to the choir here. But for those of you guys who aren't familiar with oranges, they are built to handle anything you throw at it. The head shell alone is super thick, feels like crazy durable. It's got these bars on the outside to protect the front of the amp from impact. It's got bars on the inside of the chassis going up over the transformers, so if it does take a really hard hit and something does happen to the head shell, you've got these bars like this on the inside to protect the tubes and the transformers. So just off the charts build quality. Now for the details of this amp, there really isn't a lot there. It's a very straightforward, stripped down, raw guitar amplifier. It has one channel. It has a kind of a, I guess you can call it like a contour knob here. It has a foot switchable boost, a second master volume. It has your master volume right here, and then it's got treble, mid, bass, gain, and then a three-way presence or bright switch. And then on the back is basically just got your speaker outputs and an effects loop and the foot switch jack, which this amp didn't come with a foot switch. And I was under the impression that for a near $2,000 amp, you could throw in a $30 foot switch, which is how much the foot switch for this thing cost. A little bit bummed out to see that omitted from the packaging, but is what it is. 30 bucks won't kill you, but when you're already paying nearly $2,000, I felt like it should have been in there. Okay, let's get to playing a little bit more. You obviously heard a little bit about what it sounds like there, the introduction playing, but I'm going to spend a little bit more time tweaking the controls so we can hear what all they do with the sound. Signal path, got the Lizzy Hale Explorer, still absolutely in love with this thing. It's going into the Golden Boy, which I did not use during the intro playing, but we'll hear how it reacts with this amp. And then the amp into the Splawn 412 with a SM57 and an MD421 on a Scumback H75. And that's pretty much it. All right, so we're gonna start off with low gain. We're gonna work our way up to the high gain stuff. And if you wanna skip straight to the high gain stuff, check the little timeline notations. It'll tell you where I do that. So we're gonna start off with the lower gain stuff, and we've got the brightness switch off, so it's in the middle position. And yeah, let's get going here. Alright, so I'm going to push the gain up on the amp a little bit more. I'm going to bring it back to about halfway, and I'm going to also play with the contour control so you can kind of hear how that affects the sound. Present switch is in the center, so it's off. Okay, so now I want to show you guys what cranking a Class A amp does. If you're not familiar with Class A amps and how they react to their master volume or just their volume in general being cranked up, is that you get a lot of extra gain and aggression and just nastiness in usually good ways out of the amp when you crank it up and you really get that power section producing some distortion and overdrive. So that's what I'm going to do. And I'm going to have to keep an eye on the levels because it might get a little bit rowdy over there since I'm not using any sort of a load box or attenuator for the amp right now. And I'm also going to pull the gain back a little bit so you can hear how it introduces more gain. So. And it's not noisy. It's got a little bit of typical amplifier noise, but I'm sitting here right next to this thing. It is as loud as the amp will get, which the door behind me is shaking, but extremely well composed. All right, so now the volume's back down to relatively normal levels. And I'm going to take the gain up a little bit higher and play with the present switch for a second. And then we're going to hit it with just the clean boost on the Golden Boy. And I'm also drop tuned. right, so as you could hear, once the gain goes a little bit past 1 o'clock or so, it doesn't really get that much saturated. It just gets a lot just bigger and fatter in the lows and lower mid-range, and is probably what most people associate with that orange, that growl from the orange. So how did this thing do at the show? Well, it was just an absolute powerhouse. That's how it did. It was extremely authoritative. It was raw. It was nasty. It was just the most pure, unapologetic, raw rock and roll sound that I've heard in a very long time. It also has a lot of authority in the lower mids and the low end, which, while not as just over the top as what the Nitro has, it has enough of it that it can really assert itself on stage and really deliver a much bigger sound than most amplifiers, even 50, sometimes 100 watts, are capable of producing. So this thing was an absolute beast on the stage. And as you can hear, it's got gobs of gain. I didn't use it more than that on stage. It was about halfway at max, but most of the time it was running at around 11 o'clock, and then I would hit it with the clean boost. I never stacked the gain, and I never used the actual overdrive on the Golden Boy with the amp. I only hit it with the clean boost because at that point that was all the amp needed to do all the stuff that our band needs to do. One big drawback of this amp that is fairly easy to fix, but in my opinion shouldn't be overlooked, is that on stage it is nearly impossible to see where these knobs are actually pointing because you've got this microscopic little white dot on the little top hat part. And so what I ended up doing was I just stuck this painter's tape on there, these little strips of painter's tape, to just give me an easy point of reference on where these knobs are actually pointing, and problem solved. I think that white duct tape would probably do a little bit better, or just replacing the knobs with ones that are easier to read, chicken heads, or the little kind of flower shaped ones, the little kind of like a rounded gear looking thing. I'll put a picture of it. You know what I'm talking about. You've seen them 100 times. But yeah, just something a little bit easier to see on the stage would have been really, really nice. And even though I wasn't messing with the amp too much on the stage, I was kind of a set it and forget at night. But just knowing where I was not very pleasant. When I look back there, it was impossible to see where the actual settings were. So again, if you get one of these and you play a lot on darker stages, maybe consider either doing some tape or replacing the knobs or something like that, because probably be a little bit easier to live with like that. So yeah, other than just the knobs being hard to read on a dark stage, there really wasn't anything else that I didn't like about the amp. It's a very straightforward, no-nonsense, unapologetic rock and roll amplifier, and the less is more in this particular situation because there's not a lot of stuff getting in your way. You plug in and you pretty much have a good sound right out of the gates. Now, the only thing that I really didn't find very useful was this punch or presence. It's got a little fist on here. I don't know if it's like a presence or what, but it shifts some of the top end out, but then the more you go, it brings in some mid-range also. And I felt like the sweet spot was kind of right there around 3 o'clock, and anything from here down just made it way too dark and muddy to use. So I typically I kept it, right around there, that 3 o'clock mark, pretty much the whole time. The whole time I've been playing it, actually. I did not use the foot switchable boost on stage. I didn't have the orange foot switch to use for that. It might work with any TRS switch type, single button switch, but I didn't do that. I just used the compressor in the aux box, and it does great. That's what I used for the Baby Mesa Mark V as well. All right, so that's going to wrap up this review of the Orange OR30. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I know this one went a little bit long, but it is only because I wanted to see how much sound I could coax out of a very, very simple and straightforward amplifier. And I think it does have a fairly decent range of sounds it can offer, as long as you like just the core voice of this as an alternative to other British amps like, you know, a Marshall or, you know, a Vox or whatever. It's got a lot going for it, and I think that the purity of the sound is something that shouldn't be overlooked. It is very straightforward in the layout, but also in the sound, and that can be a very valuable asset on stage because there's no extra stuff getting in the way of just a pure, outstanding tube amp rock sound. So good job, Orange, on making a really good amp, and also to my dude at Zzounds, you know who you are. Thanks for recommending this amp to try out. Still going to try out the Rock Reverb, but I'm glad I took a little detour on this OR30. So if you guys want to try out the OR30, I'll have an affiliate link for this amp, as well as basically everything else that I use to make these videos happen in the video description. And doesn't cost you guys anything extra to get down on those affiliate links, and they work for strings, cables, you name it, any kind of accessories that you might need. And if you guys aren't subscribed, hitting that subscribe button would be greatly appreciated to help me grow the channel and get more of these videos out to more people and feed that vicious algorithm that we all just love. So yeah, thanks for hanging out with me, and I've got a bit of a different video coming up next, and you might like it, you might not, but hopefully you'll at least hear me out on it. So stay tuned for that, and I will see you guys in that video. Take care.